My name is Dietlind Vander, and I live in Portland, Maine. My studio is in nearby Westbrook on the top floor of an old mill building. 1,200 square feet with tall ceilings, brick walls, hardwood floors, and 5 windows that look out over the Presumpscot River. It's a sanctuary and one of my favorite places to be. While I work, I watch birds sailing by my windows or gathering on the rocks in the river below. The light shifts all day, and the sound of the river is ever present while I paint. I work with encaustic. It's a type of paint composed of beeswax and damar that requires a heated palette. Each of the many layers that make up my paintings must be carefully fused together with a torch. In addition to painting, I have a lifelong interest in poetry, yoga, and contemplative practice, and these often feed into and inform my subject matter. Cloudscape 8. The Cloudscape series are abstract landscapes inspired by my time living in San Francisco, as well as time spent in airplanes looking out of the window at the divisions in the earth below. Portions of my paintings reference fields divided by crops or windows in a tall building. Light is falling and re-emerging. The upward shift of energy is characterized by marks that suggest birds in flight. And in this series, as in all of my work, sections of 23 karat gold leaf signify our inner light, the divine spark in each of us. La Pasadita. La Pasadita means the past in Spanish. This painting can be hung right side up or upside down. That was important to me because as we consider our past selves and the joy and sorrow that lead us to wherever we find ourselves in our current lives, it seems to me that there are multiple ways we could interpret those experiences. We could afford them greater or lesser significance, greater or lesser weight. 2/3 of this painting is composed of intricately detailed sections filled with color and marks, while the other third remains open and expansive. A delicate white gestural brushstroke separates the two. Repeated hatch marks, which are a signature of my work, can be read in a number of ways. They create movement and pattern, and on a metaphorical level, they represent breath, story, secrets, a kind of ancient language. With La Pasadita, I was trying to create a piece that was a map of sorts, one filled with reference for all that came before it, and a vessel to contain it. Pond 2. There are over 6,000 ponds and lakes in Maine. Water is a big part of our culture and a way of life. And for me, water is also a metaphor for human life and a source of contemplation. Like our minds, which can become captured or carried away by thoughts and planning, water can become easily disturbed. But left to itself, the surface quickly settles into stillness. Water reflects back all that it encounters, and there are layers and depths below that we can barely glimpse. In Maine, summer is fleeting, and there is this desire to hang on to the warmth and the quick flare of growth. For me, the Pond series is a meditation on transient beauty and the passage of time. It is a reminder to slow down, to look deeply, and to wonder at the mystery behind and beneath all of life. Drift. Drift was inspired by time on Sabaday Lake this summer. My partner and I spent several afternoons slowly paddling through lily pads and grasses on the lake. I became enthralled with the water lilies along the shore, the lines they made, their delicate shapes, the way they gathered in clusters, knocking this way and that when the water was disturbed. As with Pond, I was trying to capture the quality of the light and reflected color on the water, a breeze ruffling its surface, and a sense of looking down through the water to the life below. Sea rose. Sea rose is the German word for water lily. Back in the early 90s, when I was working for the Appalachian Mountain Club and living in New Hampshire, I'd pass a pond filled with water lilies on my drive back from visiting family in Maine. Often the light would be low, either because it was early morning or late in the afternoon on a spring or summer day. I found the combination of the light on the water's surface and those showy, fragrant flowers so beautiful, it filled me with a particular kind of happiness. I was trying to capture a bit of that here. The layers of water, the reflected color, the golden light, and a big extravagant flower. Draumur 4. Draumur means dream in Icelandic. I traveled to Iceland in 2017 in the winter when there's only 4 hours of light each day. I was utterly transfixed by the landscape, which is uniquely void of trees. Watching the snow drift across the roads, climbing to the top of a defunct volcano in a storm, wandering a black sand beach, I found myself in a dreamscape, a land of stark contrasts and profound beauty. Each of my Draumur paintings has a lot of white in it because I wanted to convey the emptiness I felt in Iceland, but at the same time, I was trying to capture something of its mystery. While I was there, I watched a documentary about an Icelandic landscape painter named George Goodney. He said of his work, "You go past the materials and into the painting itself." I thought then, and I still believe, that a good painting should have that kind of effect on the viewer. Strom 5. Strom is Scandinavian for river. This series was inspired by watching the water passing in a riverbed. Light reflecting off the surface, small eddies, the ripples and movement, the clarity of the water giving a view of the earth below. There's a Japanese-American artist named Okada Kenzo, whose paintings I admire a great deal. He associated his work with yugen, which is a Japanese aesthetic that describes a kind of beauty characterized by tranquility, quietude, and mystery. Meaning literally dark or obscure, yugen suggests beauty that's only partially perceived. It's fully felt, but barely glimpsed by the viewer. Kenzo said of his work, "I found myself creating what my innermost self was trying to express. Wherever I am, the important thing for me is to be receptive to what nature has to offer, to find the splendor of beauty in the simplest of forms." This attempt to convey beauty and simplicity is also at the heart of my work, and his words resonate deeply with me. Sueno II and Sueno III. Sueño is a Spanish word which means both sleep and dream. This series is horizontal rather than the squares that I frequently work in, which lends it a sense of landscape. The marks in this work and the way I divide the painting's plane into blocks of color reference fields, large and small-scale agriculture, birds, and bodies of water. Abstract in nature, they are really meant to be emotionally resonant rather than representational. I created them with the intention that they might fit over a bed and illustrate a sort of inner landscape. Lake of the Clouds. The Lakes of the Clouds are a set of tarns, which are mountain lakes, located at just over 5,000 feet between Mount Monroe and Mount Washington in the White Mountains. These lakes form the source of the Ammonoosuc River, which is a tributary of the Connecticut River. When I worked for the Appalachian Mountain Club in my 20s, I held a variety of jobs. I worked in reservations, at the front desk of the Pinkham Notch Visitor Center, as a guided hikes leader for the education department, at what was then the Crawford Notch Hostel and is now the Highland Visitor Center. I drove a shuttle bus to pick up hikers, filled in as a caretaker off-season, and volunteered on search and rescue missions. I also worked at Zealand Falls and Lonesome Lake Huts. And my sister, Deirdre, worked at Greenleaf and Lakes of the Clouds, which we affectionately referred to as lakes. My years at the AMC were incredibly special, and they gave me a deep and lasting love of hiking and also of the White Mountains in particular. When I was 19, I did my first multi-day traverse to visit my sister. It was the first time I saw one of the Lakes of the Clouds, and I thought it was just the most beautiful thing. Pristine water reflecting the wide open sky. This is what I was trying to convey with this painting, and really with all of my work, which is a kind of beauty that stops you in your tracks. This has been Dietlind Vander. Thank you so much for joining me.